Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Connecting Dots Counseling. Today I have the honor to have Stephanie Freeman. Thank you for coming. You are an attorney who specialized on trust, estate, wills, counseling, and kind of consulting regarding trust. Anything else you would like to add about your work?
Thank you, Gitit, for having me. I am an attorney. I work in the trust and estates field. In addition to doing all those, working on those matters like wills and powers of attorney, I also do protective proceedings, which involves going to court if someone is under a disability and needs someone to get appointed to be their guardian or conservator here in Colorado. And also I do probate cases, which is estate administration after someone passes away. But another area that I focus my time on is domestic violence activism here in Arapahoe County, Colorado.
Before we'll touch that, what brought you to choose that field? I'm sure it's not the first time you've been asked about that.
So I don't know if I chose it or it chose me.
Nice.
But I had worked for the courts in Colorado for a number of years, and one of the courts I worked at was the Denver Probate Court, where I helped people who didn't have attorneys navigate their business before the court. So unfortunately someone had passed away or someone had a disability and they had no lawyer, and I would kind of guide them procedurally how to present their matter to the court and get it resolved.
Right.
And then after that, I, because of COVID, a lot of positions were cut at the Colorado Judicial Branch. I was one of the people laid off, and I got a phone call from a law firm who needed help in their trust and estates department, and I went there and worked there and learned a lot. And now I do it for myself. I'm a one-woman show, and that really couldn't be better for me.
I like that term, one woman show, because that relates to your other hat, that's actually the cause of this conversation regarding, as you mentioned, domestic violence. We'll hear your story here about how you had to stand up for yourself and to do the whole work to make sure your voice is being heard. But before we start, I would like to explain more, what does it mean, domestic violence? So would you like to explain from your experience or your hat of work?
Domestic violence is something between what's called intimate partners. So it's a girlfriend, boyfriend, spouse, former spouse, children, grandparents, kind of inter-family violence or intimate relationship, chosen family violence, or former family violence. In my case, there was a lot of kind of verbal and emotional abuse that I didn't really recognize was the initial cobblestones of that road, until a couple of years into a relationship when there was an instance of physical violence, which was shocking and unacceptable, and addressed in conversations. I never even thought to call the police. I was kind of shocked. What I should have done was leave immediately. What I did instead was try to fix it. And then it didn't happen again for a couple of years. And then it happened again. Same situation. Didn't involve the police. Didn't leave. Wish I had. But thought I could fix it. And then a couple of years went by, and then there was a linear escalation a couple of years ago.
Right. So you touch here this cycle of violence, that it starts quiet, gentle, like sometimes we're not aware of it, as a tiny intimidation, right? And you touch the fact that domestic violence can be emotional, it can be psychological, it can be, well, maybe I explain. Emotional, it's talking down about you, right? Minimizing your self-esteem. The psychological piece of it is the words that going against you, that minimize your mindset toward yourself, that you learn to believe in those titles, right? It's because of you I behave like that. It's you are to blame. You caused that, right? That's the psychological piece that really impacting how we see ourselves. We touch the sexual assault, like we think, oh, he's my husband, or my spouse, sorry, I always supposed to give him whatever he wants, yet I have my rights on my body, and if I don't want that, it's okay to say no. So yes, there was rape in partners that we're not aware of.
And in some states, marital rape is not a crime.
Right. This is like a culture piece that we bring in, that we need to satisfy our spouse, regardless of what we feel about that in that moment. We didn't talk, but we'll come to that. Domestic violence can be financially, right? Controlling your finance, controlling where you're going to spend your money, kind of tracking you. Oh, this is what you did. Oh, why? Right? Kind of becoming, he's investigating or telling you where you're allowed to spend money and where not. But that's something that's part of this cycle, that it's quiet, that we're not aware of. It's like, as you said, oh, I'll fix it. It's not a big deal. He didn't mean to, right? Until it becomes the physical, right? That the physical element is kind of blown in our face. Like it's literally shown, right? We don't see, or we cannot show that we've been sexually harassed or molested or victimized, or financially. It's, oh, he's just taking care of you, right? It's okay. Yet when it becomes an abuse, we can see it. Even then, we're giving excuses for their behavior,
which I think a lot of people do. And it's a constellation, in my situation, there were certain stars, and when we connect those stars, it becomes a constellation. And for me, fortunately, I would not say in my relationship there was rape, but there was certainly some element of, violation of boundaries. Financially, there was a lot of pressure to do things that were not wise, but trying to point out that reality was a problem. But I'm really wary of saying anything that leads to people thinking in their minds, oh, he said, she said, right? This isn't, my story is not about a he said, she said. These things happened, and like I said, to the last year of the relationship, they escalated, and culminated with a final physical assault that was terrifying to the core. And the mask of this individual, I saw it completely fall off, and I ran. Earlier that year, when it started again, I had gone to a therapist, and I told her about everything that had happened, the other 3 instances of violence, And she said to me, okay, you have to leave. And what did I say, Gitit? No, I can fix this.
Right.
But I don't think that it's fixable. And I want people to know it's not, and certainly I'm not saying men always abuse women.
Mm-hmm.
It's known. Women abuse men physically, sexually, financially, emotionally. Certainly, the statistics show it's more frequently men that abuse. And what we're talking about today is just my story.
Right.
But I didn't leave when my therapist said that. And then she gave me a book to read and to help me in making a decision. And the first page said, is there physical violence? If so, put down the book and leave. But I was like, no, we're going to fix it. I'm going to fix it. But like I said, these issues are too large, I think, for someone in a relationship to fix. And if at all safe or possible, given life's realities of children and homes and money and homelessness, it's not always an option. But for me, it was, at the end of the day, the only option.
Right. You said it's not fixable. I just want to clarify that. It depends what you want to fix, right? When we want to fix something, we need to focus only on our behavior, which is what we have control over.
Right.
Right? So you needed to step outside of it to be able to see the picture differently and see what's your control, what you can change. You definitely cannot change his behavior.
No.
His behavior can only be changed by him. It's doable, but that's where he needs to do his work.
And I gather from research that it's a very small statistic of individuals who seek to change in this manner, that there's success. And success is defined by, do they put their hands on their intimate partner ever again? My personal conclusion is, if someone has put their hands on you once, it's going to happen again.
Right. That brings back to what we start to discuss about what domestic violence is, and you touched a very important piece of it. It's breaking boundaries, right? That there's the boundaries shifted. So actually, when the first physical violation happened, it's not the first step that happened, but we were not aware of it. And I'm not here to judge, but it's just to be much more aware of it started before that. This is kind of as we start talking about the violation of the cycle of intimidation, that the intimidation started with words. Right? That the moment we allowed certain words to come in to our relationship, between our relationship, it's actually we open a fence that, oh, that's okay. You can do more of that. I'm capable of handling it, right? This is where it's important to set healthy boundaries of saying, I do not deserve you talking to me like that. And stand up for yourself.
Which often, usually, I would say always, requires that you love yourself.
Definitely.
Right.
That's very important. First of all, you need to love yourself, and sometimes we do not know what it means. It's kind of, right? But if there are words that you're not going to tell to your best friend, then don't tell yourself, right? We need to be our own best friend.
Right.
And it will help us to recognize, no, I wouldn't tell that to you, so I do not deserve to tell that to myself, which means I'm not going to allow anyone else to tell that to me. So this is kind of setting clear boundaries and recognizing that we don't deserve certain attitude. And it's on us to break that or to stop that. And that's where we can fix things ahead of time, right? So it's the behavioral and what's attached to it, right? Part of I think it's important to note here that our behavior relates to the way we perceived ourselves mentally, how cognitively we're seeing ourselves, right? And it comes with words. If you talk to yourself down, you learn to believe in that. That impacts us emotionally, which impacts us physically, and that relates to the behavior element that we allow in. So I think it's important to bring that cycle also to say, hold on a minute, those are elements that I can control, I can change. And that's the important piece that we're talking about. What's related to you, in a sense, not to blame, but to work on changing and protecting you. Anything else you want to add here?
Yeah, I mean, I would not have said, oh, I engaged in negative self-talk, or I told myself I couldn't do something. But I think, when we're in a relationship, a close relationship with someone, there's definitely like a blurring or a softening of boundaries. And, sometimes people say nasty things to each other, or insensitive things, or mean things. People we care about do that sometimes. And there's conversations about it and forgiveness, and we are all human, right? Mm-hmm. But I would say that when we put our hands on someone, mm-hmm. that's another story. And we are conditioned, I think women in particular, and men certainly too, that we're supposed to pair up, we're supposed to have a spouse, we're supposed to have a partner, we're supposed to have love in our lives with somebody else. And there's give and take, and some days one person has a bad day or the other one does, and we kind of get past it and make allowances. But I think a key principle of loving yourself is knowing where the line is.
Exactly.
Right? And I mean, I can't speak to in this conversation about, at what point is too much fighting, or is too much insulting, or is too much emotional abusing, or is too much, financially pressuring someone like enough for their particular red flag, their boundary, where they love themselves enough to say, I love me and I'm not doing this, right?
I'm not allowing that.
Right, I'm not allowing that, right? Mm-hmm. But in terms of the physical violence, I think that's a whole nother ball of wax. And
definitely,
but if someone does this to you and you don't love yourself, you may very well treat it as something that you'll still continue on in the relationship. And for me, there were these long gaps where that kind of physical behavior didn't occur. It's also very unbelievable and very shocking to realize that someone has put their hands on you violently. That's hard to imagine, and it's hard to fully digest, right, or grasp. I didn't hate myself, when these things happened, but I would never have said, nor was it even in my vocabulary to be like, I love myself. I would say that only occurred to me, I love me, after the final incident of violence, when, I basically had to flee my home in fear for my life. And that's been a lot of growth for me to say, I do love myself. I never even thought about loving me like loving another person. You know, my love was always external, right? I love you, so I forgive you. I love you, so I'm going to do all these things for you to help you, or, you know, give you the benefit of the doubt or whatever. But what about ourselves, right? Before we can give it away to someone else, what about us, right? I love myself, and that's kind of the end of it, right?
That's enough.
Right, that's enough. And that's it.
It's like a bucket that we need, it's like a bucket that we need to keep filling up, right? We cannot give love to others when the love is not there from the inside fulfilling us. So there's this, before I'll go, I just had that moment when you touched yourself. I saw how you kind of, it took you back, right? It triggers.
I'll never forget it.
You will never forget it, right? This is part of your story. This is part of your life. What we want to do when we work with domestic violence is to be free, right, from that violence, but also to separate yourself from the pain. The pain will always be there. It's never going to go, right? This is how it impacts our body. It impacts us emotionally. But we want to be able to enjoy life with the pain. And I think part of that abuse is that we're not allowing that to happen, because it's a mantra that we learn to believe in as part of our culture that we do not deserve that.
Right.
And you need to keep yourself in the relationship to keep things quiet. Like we're washing our laundry inside the house, right? Not outside. This is something before we continue, I just want to touch regarding domestic violence, that you're an attorney, right? You're very educated, you're a beautiful person, yet you've been a victim of domestic violence, right? This is a perfect example that domestic violence can touch all of us. It goes beyond sex, if it's female or male. There's male that being a victim. Culture, it doesn't matter where you're coming from. Socioeconomic, right? It doesn't matter how much money you have, it can still be there, right? Religious, regardless of religious, right? If whatever your belief system is, domestic violence can still happen. So what we want to raise here is awareness of, maybe it's a culture expected to, back then, to quiet your wife or kind of treat her as a dog to keep her in. I'm saying it on purpose to shake people, because that was the concept of keep your marriage quiet, right? Yet today, and some people will say that's what triggers more domestic violence, is as a female, you learn to grow yourself, right? To educate yourself, to gain, to have a higher salary from what you used to. And that may cause the comparison of and triggering the partners.
I don't know. And you know what? I don't care.
Okay.
Because what we're talking about really is assault, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, end of message.
You touch that my acceptance of assault may be different than yours. And I think it's really important. That's the personalized piece of it, that when you feel that this is it, the boundary was crossed, and you do not, your body, your guts are telling you that's wrong, that's it. There's no need to compare, because what I can handle may be different what you can handle. End of story.
Right.
That's why it's important to be really aware of, hold on a minute, what does it do to me? If it shakes me, it means I'm wrong and I need to breathe. Exactly what you did here, right? You realize how the impact it was.
It's shocking.
It is. Because domestic violence is shocking, and it should be. Because it means it's a wrong thing. Right? Whenever something is shaking us, it means it's wrong.
No matter how much we think we want to help somebody, no matter how much we think, did I cause that? No matter how much denial there is about it, it's assault.
It is assault.
And
right.
I love myself, and I will not tolerate being assaulted.
And that's very brave of you, because not everyone, this is why it's important to share your story, because
and I didn't love myself, and I did tolerate being assaulted. Not because I wanted to be assaulted, but because my love came above, for externals, overcame my love for myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
My loving nature to say, I'm going to help you, I forgive you, whatever. But really, what about me? Right? Someone just did this to me.
Right.
And there's no undoing that. So we're not even going to talk about today about what people who are in this situation right now can do, except, please, my recommendation is, if at all possible, do not involve law enforcement as your first call. My serious advice is, please call a domestic violence hotline or shelter that is not affiliated with law enforcement, because there's a real lack of training and awareness amongst law enforcement how to deal with this properly. But people in the trenches who do work at domestic violence organizations, they can help you go to the police for those situations. But please, if you have any choice or room or non-emergency situation, my recommendation would be go where you'll be helped. And that is not necessarily the police.
However, with that being said, I think it's important to note here that when it comes to safety, as you mentioned,
if you want to call 911, you call 911.
No doubts. No doubts.
Yeah.
But you're right. If you need, I think what you touched here is a very crucial element of, you are not alone.
Right.
You don't need to handle it by yourself. It's if sharing that with a friend, if it's going to professional, knowing that there's this safe places where you can let that out of your chest and get a wider view of what's your options, what's your resource.
Right.
Because
unless you're in an emergency situation where
definitely go and save yourself. Do the first thing that comes into mind.
You love yourself, so you're going to call 911.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
But if there's any way that's not a consideration, I would really suggest calling people who are trained in this field to help.
Yeah.
And the police's mission is, it's not to help people, it's to enforce the law.
And help is there.
With the police, you mean?
With information, with resource, with knowing that whatever happened to you is, you said I should have, right? We're talking here not just about the crisis, but as a kind of, how's your life? What happens in your life that you're questioning and you don't like, right? So we want here to also raise awareness to not just for crisis, but for people who learn to believe that this is their life, right? But you said they should, right? If you were to know ahead of time, you maybe act differently, or you maybe move yourself or wake up early. This is what we want to say. First of all, it's easier said should, right? Today you're in a different place that you can look back and say, hey, I could have done that. Not really. Because the person you are today wasn't the person when you were while you were there. Because that person, all he had or you had in mind is survival mode.
Right.
So you needed to act fast.
Emergently flee.
Exactly, right?
And I had never intended to call the police because I still loved this person more than I loved myself. And I was like, no, I just want to get away. I don't want there to be any consequence. I just need to escape and be alive.
And you saved yourself by making that choice
Yes.
of running away. This is where your amygdala jumped in your brain to say,
yes,
escape, run, because there is a danger. And this is something that I think we lost. That mode of, ooh, wait a second, there's danger here. And my body's here to protect me, so I need to listen to it. So whenever you have doubts, there's no doubts, right? Your body knows that
it's time
to flee, to run, right? So I just want to clarify that when we were saying should, again, you learn that things can happen differently. So what we want here is to educate people, regardless of female or male, but they've been abused, regardless if it's sexually, physically, financially, to be able to step aside and listen, right? If you're breathing, kind of, that's it, your body starts saying, hey, there's danger. So check in with yourself, right? Use the resource that is around you, that saying, exactly as you said, creating that mantra that I do not deserve that. I need to love myself more than I need that partner. And I want to clarify another piece here, that when it comes to partnership, may not be nice to say, however, it's conditional love, right? I will love you if you'll do the dishes. I would love you if you'll do things here, right? We learn to condition that love. However, when it comes to me, it's unconditional. I need to learn to love me regardless of my work, right? Whatever I do, I'm a good person. That's it. I matter. I deserve. And those are mantras that I think, especially people who are in these abusive relationships, really crucial to embed it in us. Everyone can find their own way. If it's writing it somewhere, remind them. We need those reminders, right? If it's a bracelet that says, I matter, I care for me, whatever comes into mind, whatever you feel like it's triggered, use that to fill you up. Fill that bucket with good stuff for you. And I think that's something that we miss on the way because we're focusing on how to be saved. And definitely, that's the first thing. Save yourself and your kids, right? We didn't touch here about kids because there was no issue with that. But there are people who still need to worry first for the kids. So when it comes to, you mentioned that, anything else before I go?
No, keep.
Okay. You talked about how important it is to leave. Sometimes it's hard to leave because there's kids involved, right? And I get that. In order for us to be able to be strong enough to leave, we need to create a plan. If it's financially, saving money, if it's knowing where we're going to go for the first night, the second night, the first week, right? To be able to protect us and usually it's young kids, right? That's important, and it's not easy.
No, it's incredibly daunting, and we happen to live in a geographic location where there are resources for, people in this situation. Safe House in Denver is an excellent resource. There's Rosandom Center. There's something called Gateway. And their mission is to help victims of domestic violence preserve their own lives, escape the violence with their children, which, that's a whole nother mess in these situations. But yeah, things are messy.
Yeah.
And when it's, the other parent of your children, it's very hard, even harder to logistically do this. And there are people in parts of the country where there are no agencies like this, not agencies, but, organizations whose mission is to help. There are places where there is no help. There is a national hotline, however, and I can't speak to the quality of the help, but there is some sort of help involved. So I'm kind of speaking from a place of privilege where, I live in a geographic region where there are these resources that don't involve law enforcement, which is not a social service agency, it's law enforcement. And, certainly we've all heard in the news about the problems with policing with integrity, and that's unfortunately a fact that we live with. And if there's any way to keep that out of your already very bad situation, please do. I'm certainly not saying don't file a police report, don't seek accountability through the, law, through the justice system, but your safety, and if there's children, the safety of your children is paramount. All that can come, will come, may come, but seek help from helpers, right? Not someone whose title is enforcer. Because if you have any choice in the matter, if it's an emergency, hang up and call 911.
Right.
If it's not, I would suggest reaching out to these groups first, and they can be with you when you go to the police for protection, because you've already been assaulted. You need protection, and you need someone who is aware of the dynamics in these situations, aware of the players, aware of the process, so that you don't get further hurt.
Right.
And you've already been hurt.
And when we are hurt, you touched a lot of important pieces, and I want to bring them back. We lost that concept of self-worth. We have more doubts of who we are. Yet just by the thought of, I want to stop that violence, this is where you get the power. This is where you raise above that kind of repetitiveness, and you're saying, no more. That's a crucial element to have. Sometimes we have those excuses that maintain us.
And it may not happen consciously.
No,
it may be instinctive.
definitely.
I have to run right now. Flee. That's
Right.
your amygdala speaking.
Right. And that's a way to protect yourself, right? This is
Right.
the cause.
Fight or flight.
Exactly. However, you touched the concept of children. We didn't touch that here, but we will give that excuses of, I need to stay because for the sake of my children, right? They need to be in relationship. Yet we are not aware of the power of being a witness, the negative power of being a witness of domestic violence, that actually impact our subconscious and conscious and unconscious, that will change our lives. So actually, this is where therapy is important to come into place, to learn to believe in your qualities and what you give to your kids, right? The being in a relationship, it's not necessarily healthy. We want to stay in healthy relationships, so that will be a concept for the kids to see what's right and wrong. So it is important to say, hey, hold on a minute, what do I show my kids? What do my kids get from that? And maybe it's not healthy for them to be witnessed violent, because this is what they learn. So we want, in a way, to say,
and it's not.
right, that's another piece actually of saying, I want to do it for my kids to have a better future and not like me, right? So in a way, that
certainly there is a breaking of a cycle, absolutely,
right.
And I think, you know, people who are in these situations are kind of trapped in a cycle. But when we do love ourselves, even if we don't at that minute, or never did, or never even thought about it, and if we did think about it, say, well, no, I really don't love myself. I don't really feel like I'm my own best friend. I feel like I'm everybody else's best friend, but, you know, I'm kind of down there on the list. Knowing what it is the first step. And what it is, I loved you, Gitit, right? If someone put their hands on you, hell no, right?
So this is where
and I love me too. And someone did put their hands on me, but it wasn't like, it was hell no, but let me help you. Instead of hell no, let me help myself. That's loving yourself first, right?
Definitely, right. This is the awareness of, hey, hold on a minute. I do more for the relationship for that person than to me. And you touched something, and I want to clarify that. You have no control of the abuser.
No.
You cannot change the abuser.
No.
Yet, when he's saying or she's saying that it's your fault, I'm behaving like that because of you, no. Abuser does not lose control, but he gets control. He takes the control. And this is important to separate that it's, when it comes to blame and shame, it's important to separate that's not on you, that's on the abuser, that needs to change and work. But again, that's not on you to fix that.
You can't fix it.
No.
And
right.
Science to date has not been able to fix it.
Right, because the person needs to want to be ready to do the work.
And
right.
I think it's very hard.
It is.
Because once a person has shown their capability for this, you know, it's kind of baked in. So it's very hard to uncrack an egg, let alone unbake a cake.
Right.
And because the victim of the violence now has their own broken cake, that's number one. I have to protect myself. I love me. And this is what I'm going to do, is love myself.
Right. And
first.
Right. And you mentioned broken cake. As long as it's a cake that is broken, that's great. But you are not broken. You are strong.
You may have some breaks.
We all have that,
right? And we all do have breaks, and this is a pretty bad break,
right.
Literally and figuratively. And there's help for you, and that's who our concern is about. Right.
Seek help regardless of how great it is, how it's, you know, if it comes to money, there's always, as you mentioned, places that can provide that.
The hotline is free.
Right.
Yeah. And there's a lot of good free information.
Right. That it's out there. The concept needs to change, that you deserve to take care of you. And if you cannot do that by yourself, it's okay. There's help around, and you do not need to struggle in silence. or by yourself.
Even if you don't know anybody to talk to, or have no family, or have no friends, there is still the National Domestic Violence Hotline.
There's always going to be
There
someone
is
or something
somewhere for you.
Exactly. And that's important to bring in. It may feel like you're alone, yet it's just a feeling. Again, we need to separate that and control that. We can change our mindset. We can change our feelings, although it sounds weird, but we can. And we can change our own behaviors, not others, ours. And that's where the work is done. It may be exhausting, may be a long journey, yet you deserve that. And that's what I think we want to say here. If you have any question, any comments, please reach out to either of us or to anyone that you know or you feel comfortable with. But the idea is to find someone to build trust back, if it's with yourself or with others. And that's the beauty of learning again.
And the credits will have the number for the national hotline.
Right.
So that's one baby step, if you never did before, to love you. You deserve it.
Right. And it can be in simple things, right? Being aware of what you're eating, how you're eating, gaining relatively good enough sleep, physical activity, kind of going back to the basics to be able to breathe deeply and better. So there's so much more to talk when it comes to domestic violence, but we don't want to overwhelm people. Any other important piece you want to add here before we'll conclude?
I think in our next conversation, we'll talk about what I personally am doing in terms of domestic violence activism here in Arapahoe County, Colorado, where I'll tell my story and what I'm trying to do about it, and how loving myself is the underpinning of all of it.
I love that. To be continued then. Thank you. Feel free again to make any comments, questions below. We'll do our best to answer as fast as we can. Thank you and take care of yourself. Thank you very much for coming here. It was very powerful and important. So we'll just keep doing what you're doing.
And you as well, Gitit.
Thank you.